just so everyone knows. Thank you so much for joining us. It is 7 o'clock and we are going to get started with our Master Matrix webinar. We're going to talk about how the Master Matrix is a false solution for Iowa's factory farm crisis. We've seen across the state communities rise up against factory farms and against the permitting process that's just simply not working. And it's allowing factory farms to be rubber stamped all across the state. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start off with Pam giving us some information about the Master Matrix, and I'm going to talk about some of the problems and what we think is the solution to Iowa's factory farm crisis. So with that, I am going to share my screen and pass it over to Pam.
Thank you, Jess. So let's start out our discussion with some terminology so that we're all on the same page. So a CAFO is sometimes called a confinement, sometimes called a factory farm, or industrial ag is sometimes used to apply to a CAFO. But a CAFO is a way of raising animals where the animals are confined to a building and they do not go outside for fresh air or to eat. They live their entire lives inside the building. A construction permit is required for the largest confinements. They have to have a permit from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources before the CAFO can be built and before any animals can be put into the building. The Master Matrix is required for only the largest CAFOs. It has to be completed before the permit is issued. The owner has to answer some questions and they are scored. The questions answers and the scoring combined are called the Master Matrix. There are some serious pollution problems created by Iowa's CAFO industry. Some of the operations, particularly poultry, store the manure in a dry form. In other situations, particularly hogs, the manure is mixed with large quantities of water and stored in enormous lagoons or pits. The pits in hogs, for example, are underneath the buildings. There are large disposal problems created with that much manure and waste. And obviously, water and air pollution is created on a scale that would never have been possible in a diversified family farm system. The air pollution from these farms destroys the quality of life in many Iowa communities. The air pollution is generally toxic hydrogen sulfide and ammonia. The air emissions devastate property values of rural homes because people don't want to live near that amount of smelly pollution, and it threatens public health. The risks to the public health are due to the toxins that exacerbate respiratory illness, such as asthma, cardiovascular diseases. Illnesses can come from antibiotic-resistant pathogens, and one of the ones that you usually think about with respect to CAFOs is MRSA, and health problems that are created by contaminated wells. The manure spills are regularly reported in Iowa when the pollution hits the rivers and streams. Hundreds of thousands of fish have been killed with manure spills. And along with that, the manure, when it enters water, it causes algae to grow. And the algae causes a bacteria that creates a toxin. So microcystin is pretty dangerous. It's one of the toxins. And microcystin is one of the things that causes beach advisories. So people who want to go to the beaches will find that sometimes there are warnings about swimming. Groundwater pollution is also a problem. If well water becomes contaminated with nitrates, the young children can get a blue baby syndrome if they drink that water. It affects the amount of oxygen that their body has, and it's a pretty dangerous health problem. So I'm going to leave this chart up for a while. It has to do with the number of animals that require a construction permit. So for slaughter and feeder cattle, it's 1,000 animal units. For horses, it's 500. We're talking about fish, it's 1 million fish require a construction permit. Butcher and breeding swine that weigh more than 55 pounds are 2,500 animals that are required for a construction permit. As you can see, it's large quantities of animals. If there are fewer animals in this threshold, then the master matrix doesn't apply. As I mentioned, the master matrix is a list of questions, and we'll go into that in a few minutes. But once a CAFO gets to be built with a construction permit, there are very particular rules that have to be followed, and the DNR gets involved, the supervisors get involved, board supervisors, but it's a real tricky process. Another thing that gets to be tricky is that if more than one building is constructed on a property where a CAFO already exists, you need to talk to the Department of Natural Resources, because there are all kinds of special rules that are involved with county animals, and whether they share ownership and how they're calculated. Another tricky part of this is if a CAFO is partially roofed, it doesn't count as a CAFO. So if 10% of the roof is left uncovered, it's not considered a confinement. And the master matrix doesn't apply. A lot of other rules don't apply. And in fact, the DNR has even allowed a building with the doors left open and the animals pinned in, unable to leave the building, to be called an open feedlot, not a confinement. So it's tricky, and it's one of the problems with the master matrix. So let's go on and talk about the master matrix itself. It's a list of questions and a point system. There are 44 questions. The questions cover water, air, and community impacts. And out of the 44 questions and the scoring, a minimum of 440 out of 880 possible points have to be obtained in order to get a construction permit. In other words, only half of the points have to be met. Now, there are some requirements for air, for water, and community impacts, but for most of those large CAFOs, it's a pretty low bar. And then on top of it, if a CAFO was constructed before 2002, they can expand to 1,600 animal units without submitting an application. If you want to see the master matrix, I have that on the screen. Unfortunately, it's covered up, but you can go to the DNR website in the environmental protection area, and you can look at the matrix itself. It's several pages, and usually these are filled out by professional organizations who make it a career to looking at the master matrix and filling out the point system. And with that, Jess Missouri is going to talk about some of the problems with the master matrix.
Thank you so much, Pam. So I want to talk about why the master matrix has too many loopholes, why it's not working for Iowans, and I want to provide some real world examples in my experience working on campaigns with local communities across the state to try to stop incoming confinement factory farms. So first of all, just the process in general is really fast. It is hard for a community to find out about a confinement and actually have the time to organize themselves to stop it. So once an applicant submits their application, they'll submit it to the county and the DNR makes sure that the county has a copy. And once that's confirmed, the county has 14 days to put it in the newspaper. So unless somebody is calling the county supervisors on a regular basis and saying, did you receive any applications? Did you receive any applications? They're not going to know potentially until 14 days after the application was received, whenever it's published in the newspaper. A lot of time we see that those notices are, just a couple square inches in the newspaper. Sometimes you find them in the sports section where you really wouldn't be looking for that stuff. So once it's published and once the application is received, the county has 30 days to score the master matrix. So that means they have to look through this whole document of questions and see if they agree with the applicant, because the applicant fills out the master matrix themselves. So if you're, Joe Schmo from the public and you find out 14 days in, you only have about 2 weeks to organize your community to lobby the supervisors to take points off the matrix or to deny it or recommend deny to the DNR. So once the county has made their decision, they don't actually have the ability to deny it. They can just recommend to the DNR that it be denied or approved. Then the DNR will receive that county decision, and then they have 30 days to make a decision. They can either agree with the county and approve it or deny it, or they can go against the county and approve it or deny it. So at that point, it's kind of a done deal, but there is a little step that is very hard to convince county supervisors to do because it's very expensive. They have to get their lawyers involved, but they can appeal what the DNR decides to the Environmental Protection Commission. That has not always been fruitful in the past because the Environmental Protection Commission is appointed by the governor, and so it's not always been a friendly commission. So we don't see a lot of counties take that opportunity for one, the cost, and for two, just the likelihood of the outcome. But the county has 14 days where they can say, we don't agree with the DNR's decision. We would like the Environmental Protection Commission to take a look at it. And then going through the timeline again, the EPC has 35 days to hold a hearing to make a decision, the final decision on whether it's approved or denied. And what I've seen in the past is that because of these time limits, communities are rushed to organize. A lot of the time they don't find out about it until it's too late. And then especially when you talk about the EPC meets just once a month. So this 35-day timeline means there's really only one meeting that the hearing could be held at. And in the case in Adair County, I think this was back in 2013, we did successfully convince the supervisors to appeal that decision with the EPC. However, the only meeting it could be at was the next month's meeting, and that meeting happened to be in, I think it was north of Sioux City, in Orange City or something like that, somewhere north up in northwest Iowa, which was over 4 hours away from where the neighborhood was, where this confinement was going to be built. And so not a lot of people could come because that's just very difficult to take an entire day off of work to drive multiple hours to attend a hearing where you're only going to get to speak for 2 minutes. So those timelines really hinder people's efforts to really adequately review the applications, to submit comments, for communities to organize themselves and talk to their neighbors, because really it's application received, 30 days for the county supervisors to make a decision. Then the DNR has 30 days to make the final decision. 14 days to appeal, and then they have to hold a meeting within 35 days. So we're talking really under, a little under 3 to 4 months for this whole process to happen. So that's one. A bias exists throughout the permitting process, and it favors the applicant because it's rushed and because they fill out the application themselves and because DNR lacks the resources to do adequate reviews in a lot of cases. And if the county doesn't flag something that's wrong, the DNR isn't even going to look into it. So that's one, a huge problem, that it moves too quickly and there's not enough input. So if we go to the next one here, is that the master matrix only covers certain size confinement. So 1,000 animal units, which is equivalent to hogs. I'm going to talk in hogs most of the time because that's what we see the most of here in the state. That's 2,500 hogs. If you look at a lot of the applications that have been submitted over the past few years, you're going to see applications for 2,499 hogs. That's just one hog under the permit threshold to have to actually go through the master matrix. So this is really only covering a small fraction of the confinements that are entering our state. And all they have to do really is apply with setback distances. And what that means, they have to be a certain distance away from something. They have to be away from residences and churches and schools and businesses and thoroughfares. And there's wells, lots of different things they have to be set far back from. And if you follow all of the state law regulations and setback distances, that's all you have to do. You can get enough points to beat the matrix. And one struggle that we've seen is that there's a really small definition of what's considered a business or a religious institution. In Powesheik County, there was a community there that was fighting some factory farms that were coming in, and one of the community members owned an in-home nursing home where she took care of 3 elderly people in her home. And the DNR wanted to argue that that was not considered a business. The other neighbor owned a crop dusting company. Not that we would agree with crop dusting, but it is a business. In Iowa, we have winters, and so not all businesses are open year round. And that was the reason that they decided that their crop dusting business was not a business, because it's not a year round business. But if you think about ice cream shops in Iowa, they're not open year round. There's a lot of businesses that are open year round. So they really narrowly define what some of those religious institutions and businesses are. And when you look at the setback distances of how far they have to be away, for homes, it does vary depending on the size of the facility, but it's generally 1,875 feet is what I see the most on applications. And that's not enough to keep away the smell. That's not enough a way to keep away the toxins that are in the air from the factory farm. And we see increased rates of asthma all across the state for people who live nearby. People complain about not being able to have barbecues or hang their clothes out on the line. They have to shut their windows in the summer if the wind's blowing in the right direction. So those distances are not really adequate in protecting Iowans and their communities. And then also, because we see a lot of factory farms come in just under that permit threshold, there are fewer regulations and fewer protections that communities and neighbors have nearby to object to the siting of those and to take any action after it's built for things that are impacting their lives. So the scoring is inadequate. So this is going to get in the weeds a little bit, but as Pam said, this is basically a test. With 880 points total, you have to get 440 to pass. So I don't know about you, but when I was in school, 50% was not a passing grade. 50% meant you got to do it again. So just right there, that's inadequate. If this master matrix is meant to improve water, air, and community, getting 50% is not adequate in protecting people. And like I said, in setback distances, you can get most of your points there. You don't even have to do things like install air filters or make sure that the community supports what you're doing, because you can get all 440 points just by being a certain distance away from things. And a lot of the points are inappropriately weighted. So I'm going to give you a few examples of that. So remember, we're trying to get to 440 points. That's the minimum that you need. You can get 30 points for having a formed manure pit. So a concrete pit where the manure is stored, which is standard on all confinements nowadays. They're all in concrete pits that are under the building. Every once in a while you'll see a lagoon, but either way, it's a formed manure pit. You get 30 points for just putting your manure in a pit, which is standard, but you only get 10 points if you install a filter that helps control odor for your neighbors. So, you know, I'm going to make sure that I use the standard manure pit and not worry about doing a filter. 30 points versus 10 points. You can get 20 points for having a truck turnaround area. Confinements have a lot of semi trucks coming and going to drop off feed, take hogs in and out. You get 20 points for just having an area big enough for the truck to turn around in, which is obviously common. That's standard. You would never build one without adequate truck turnaround area, but you get 20 points for that. But you can only get 10 points if you have buffer strips on all the manure fields that have waterways running through them or adjacent to them. So I'm going to make sure that my truck turnaround area is big enough for 20 points and not worry about 10 points for buffer strips to protect our water. One of the questions that just gets me the most is that you can get up to 30 points for just being a certain size. So for just being 2,500 head of hogs, you can get a large number of points. You don't have to do anything above and beyond other than say, I'm going to build this thing. But you only get 5 points for having a closure plan. And we see in a lot of counties that once these facilities are at their end of the life and they can't, the farmer moves or they just need to shut it down because it's old, counties are a lot of times stuck with having to get the pit out of the ground, stuck with having to tear down the building. And that's taxpayer money that ends up having to pay for that. So 30 points for being a certain size, 5 points for having a closure plan. And then I'm going to give you one more example, 30 points for the manure structure just being covered. So when you look at all of the confinements in Iowa, they all have roofs. They have a building with a roof, and then the hogs are in there. And then they have a slatted floor where when they poop, the manure just drops through the floor into a concrete pit at the bottom. So you can get 30 points for making sure that your manure structure is covered. The very fact that that's the design of confinements, that they are a pit with a building and then a roof, you get 30 points just for that. But you only get 15 points if you do groundwater monitoring. So what we see happen is that factory farms do the bare minimum. They just make sure they comply with setback distances. They make sure that their manure pit is concrete and is under the building. They make sure that they have a roof over their building, and they make sure they're just a certain size. And essentially, there you go. You've passed the master matrix. And Iowa law is pretty clear that if you get your 50%, that it's approved. You can't really look into other things outside of that. You can't take into account the fact that there's an impaired waterway in the area, a polluted waterway in the area. So the scoring is really inadequate, and it's weighted really horribly in favor of the applicant. And another one that's on here too is, you can get points for never having a manure spill in the past. Well, if this is your first confinement that you own, you've never had a manure spill, but you still get points for that. Makes no sense. And on top of all this, these setback distances that we've been talking about, they're not based on scientific data. They're really arbitrary, and studies show that it's not actually keeping the toxins and the smelly air away from the neighbors. So the other thing too is that it's really complicated. There's like 44 questions on the master matrix. It is complicated how it's weighted because it takes into the fact of whether it's an air or water or community item. And county supervisors have a lot of stuff that they have to do, and understanding the master matrix process is not always at the top of their priority list, especially as new supervisors are elected. It's a whole process that they have to learn. So they don't do a good job all the time actually analyzing the master matrix. What they'll do, we see it happen all the time, is they just take the applicants for their word and rubber stamp it. And a lot of time, if they don't get that public notice in the newspaper right away, we'll see that they approve it before the public even has a chance to weigh in. And if the county supervisors don't do this accurately, if they don't take points off, if they don't meet the deadlines and the timelines, then it results in the application being approved by the DNR, because they have to meet these timelines in order to be able to weigh in. A lot of counties just decide they don't want to have to worry about this, so they just rubber stamp all of them. And then another big problem with this is the master matrix is not something that every county has the ability to use every year. Every year, a county has to pass a resolution saying, we, as Polk County or Poweshiek County or Ida County or whatever, has to say, we are going to use the master matrix for the next year. And if a county does not pass that resolution, I believe the date is January 31st for the deadline for that, they don't get to use the master matrix. That means there is no permitting process other than submitting the application to the DNR. And residents in those counties are really out of luck in any bit of ability to weigh in and stop any confinements that threaten the environment or the community. So not every county in Iowa passes the master matrix. These are the red counties, are the counties that use the master matrix. This is from 2020. Then you can see there are 10 counties. If you live in one of these 10 counties in Iowa, you don't really have any ability at a local level to weigh in. So that's a big problem. It should be, if we'd prefer to not have the master matrix, but while it still does exist, it should be every county uses it. It doesn't have to take a reminder every single year for counties to pass that resolution. So the other thing with the master matrix is counties, I've been saying counties can weigh in, the public can weigh in, but they don't actually have the ability to make the final decision. We have no local control in Iowa. So what counties can do is they can weigh in and say, we disagree with 20 points that they took for question number 44. And then the DNR reviews it and says, we agree with you, Poweshiek County, or we don't agree with you. And so that's really frustrating when local counties and local people, they know what's best. They know what they want for their county, the direction they're taking their county in. And if their hands are tied and they can only make recommendations, a lot of counties just have just thrown their hands up and surrender and said, this is how it is in Iowa. And the other thing is, if there is a very specific item that you want to take into account, like let's say a city or a small town knows that they are going to be expanding. And that's why they don't want a CAFO on that side of town, because they know they're going to be building more homes and expanding their town. The DNR can't take that into consideration because it's not in the master matrix. So things that local people are working on in their communities that aren't covered under the master matrix aren't even taken for account. So our polluted waters list is not always taken for account. And one thing that we see happen is that communities are pressuring their supervisors as hard as they can. They're attending meetings and writing letters and organizing their neighborhoods, and the counties just have no say in it at all. And when they go to the state, it's always rubber stamped. And it's not a process that actually allows public input. Really, the decision makers are pretty much all appointed by the governor, because it's the head of the DNR or the EPC that can make the final decisions on this. And so like we were mentioning earlier in this process, if the DNR approves a confinement and the county disagrees and wants to actually take that step to appeal, they're the only ones that can do it. If the county won't appeal, the neighbors can't do it themselves. And so that's really frustrating, because if you don't have the support of your county supervisors, or if they've already just thrown their hands up and they don't want to fight it anymore, the neighbors have no ability to appeal this process to the EPC. Only the county can appeal the issuance of a construction permit. And the other thing we've seen too is, after a confinement is built, we see a lot of problems with nuisance lawsuits. So if you try to file a nuisance lawsuit, Iowa has passed a law to really burden people who are filing the lawsuit. They've made it really hard, where if you lose, you have to pay the other side's legal fees, that you can only file a nuisance lawsuits once in a lifetime. There's just these ridiculous things that really give neighbors absolutely no input into what's happening in their own backyards. Another thing, this is kind of mentioned earlier when we said you can't take into consideration anything that's not in the master matrix. So there are some places where we just don't want them. We don't want them in watersheds where we have high nitrate levels in river streams, because when you look at the polluted waters report, you'll see that a majority of the impairments are caused by E. coli, are caused by fish kills, which is manure. And that's really ties back to factory farms. We don't want a confinement in the middle of a grassed waterway. We don't want confinements in really anywhere in Northeast Iowa because of the karst topography. We worked really hard trying to stop a CAFO up in Northeast Iowa that was built pretty much on top of a sinkhole. And it was really hard to get DNR to even to weigh in on that. We did not win that fight. But there is no one who has control over that as long as the master matrix points are met and that the setbacks are met. It can only be what is in the master matrix. So, is the master matrix beyond repair is the ultimate question. Our opinion is yes, 100%. The master matrix is failing Iowans. The problems are huge. Communities don't have input. Supervisors don't have any power. All the decision makers are appointed by the governor. And we're seeing the impacts of confinements impact people all over the state, from polluted water, polluted air, neighbors losing property values, the roads being tore up from all the semi trucks, and then counties having to use taxpayer dollars to fix the roads. This is not something that we can fix. It's beyond simple repairs. So should we dump it all together, or should we establish a new process, or is it a time to do a moratorium on CAFOs because we just simply have too many in the state? And so let's dig into this a little bit here. We want to eliminate the master matrix completely. And if we don't do a moratorium, which is what we really want to do, these are some things for the meantime that would improve what's going on, is that we want to require all CAFOs, regardless of size, to submit a construction permit to the Department of Natural Resources. We want to allow neighbors or other interested parties to challenge the issuance of a construction permit. We don't want to have a time limit that hinders people's ability to weigh in and to adequately review the application. We want to allow local zoning laws. So if a city is planning on expanding, they should be able to say, we're rezoning this area and you can't build by it. And we also want counties just have simply local control. If we look up at our neighbors in Minnesota, they have local control down to the township level, where they can have the ultimate final say, yes or no. And we need to develop state standards to address water pollution, air pollution, and odor. Solving the odor problem does not solve the air pollution problem, but they both need to be solved. That's a lot. That's something that I think is going to be difficult to pass through the legislature that we have right now. So I think that the easiest thing to do is simply, we need to have a moratorium or a ban on new or expanding CAFOs in the state. To date, nothing has worked to protect our rural communities. We've tried a lot of like piecemeal things, fix this little thing here and this little thing there, and it's not working. We need to stop the damage that's happening to our neighbors and to our local communities, to water quality, to air quality, and to public health. And it's time to say enough is enough. What we need in Iowa is a moratorium on factory farms. We need no new or expanding factory farms here in the state. And one of the things that we are working on here at Sierra Club is some language for a moratorium or a ban bill. We're going to be working on this and working with some legislators, but I think what's important to point out is that we're saying that it should be a complete ban, a complete moratorium. It doesn't depend on size of the facility. Right now, we need to push the brakes and we need to push them hard. So you can take a look at this. We're recording this webinar, so you'll be able to read through this bill in a little while once we get that uploaded online, and we'll send that out to everyone. But basically, it's a pretty simple, straightforward bill. No more new confinement operations. This one also closes the loophole on the roof. If confinements leave a little bit of their roof uncovered, that they would also classify as a confinement, because as of right now, that's one of the big loopholes. So that's what we're going to be working on. We recognize that this legislative session is going to be difficult to move anything, but these bills are really going to be important for us to have talking points, to be able to continue to organize across the state and talk to our neighbors and paint this vision that we have for a clean water Iowa and for an agricultural system that not only works for farmers, but works for the environment and works for eaters and works for anyone that's here in the state. So we're going to be using our bill and our work to continue this campaign, even if it's unlikely that this is going to pass during this legislative session, because when we do get a good legislature, we don't want to be starting from ground zero. So this is our vehicle to organize around a moratorium here in Iowa. So this legislative session, we're going to be doing a lot to stop any bad bills that we see coming down the pipe. And we're also going to be continuing our conversations with legislators that we don't have on board with us for the moratorium. And we're going to need your help to do that. If it's just Pam and I talking to legislators, we're not going to get that far. So we need help from a lot of the members all across the state. And we have a legislative action team that we are going to be communicating with on a regular basis. So we encourage you to join that email list so that you can know up to the minute when it's time to take action. We'll send regular updates about bills that are moving. We're going to do live streams. We're going to do action alerts. We're going to engage with legislative forums or host our own online, not in person. So there's going to be a lot of things, and we're going to need everyone's help with that. So to join the email list, just visit sierraclub.org/Iowa. And on the right-hand corner, kind of towards the top of your screen, you're going to see a legislative action team. I'm going to actually pull it up here for you, and you will be able to see it right here. So once you get to Sierra Club's homepage, right here, join legislative action team. Click on that, fill it out, and then that's how you're going to get up to the minute updates about the legislative session and when you can take action, what bills we're monitoring, when our legislators are calling on our help to push a bill through committee or stop it from going to committee. So please join that. And then if I don't have anything else in this part, but I want to know if Pam, if you have anything else to add. Otherwise, I think we can get to some questions and answers, because I know this is very in the weeds and we recognize that. So we're trying to make it as easy to understand as possible. But a permitting process that allows potentially 1 million gallons of manure into your neighborhood should not be so hard to explain that no one can understand it, including the people who are supposed to look at the application. So
I don't have anything to add, but I will start going through the questions.
great.
And this one is from Douglas Rooney. And he says, you say some points are different county to county. Who decides each county's point system? Just the DNR. And also Wally Taylor is on. He is the legal chair and the conservation chair for the Iowa chapter, and he may jump in on some of these questions. So Jess, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, the points don't necessarily vary from county to county, but each applicant gets to pick which points they take. So out of all of the 40, I think there's 41 or 44 questions, they don't have to answer them all. They just have, each question is worth a certain number of points and they have to answer enough to get to 440. So the difference from county to county is just because one applicant may have taken points for a truck turnaround area and another applicant didn't. And so that's what's different, but the actual master matrix itself, that is the same for everyone. It's just what points you want to take. And when I send this recording out to everybody after the webinar is over, I'll probably do it tomorrow, I'll include a link to the master matrix. I think that might make it a little easier to understand when you can see, you know, a list of 44 things, they're all worth a different value of points, and you have to answer enough to get to 440.
This is Wally. Can I add something to what Jess said?
Sure can.
As Jess said, the points, the way they're scored on paper are the same, but some counties are more equipped to do a better job of deciding whether or not the points should be awarded, because sometimes they take some investigation, you know, like where are the wells, where are the water sources and so on. And some counties just don't have the resources or don't care enough to really do the investigation, and they just maybe score the points because the applicant says, well, I've done this or I've done that. So that's the variance. It isn't the point system itself, it's the ability with which the counties do the scoring.
Right.
So the next question is from Mike Carberry, and he wants to know what percentage of the master matrix applications are approved.
I have been organizing against factory farms since 2012, and I can count them on one hand. I don't even know if I can fill all 5 fingers. It's very rare. A lot of the time what we will see though is that if the DNR does find something wrong with the application, they'll notify the applicant ahead of time. And instead of denying it, they'll allow them to withdraw. So there are some that may be denied, but the DNR gives them a chance to withdraw. So very few since I've been doing this.
We have another question from an anonymous. I'm from a county that never passes the matrix. Considering all the flaws of the matrix, should we still try to get the master matrix resolution passed in January?
I say yes, because right now it's the only tool that we have. It's not a perfect tool. It's far from perfect. It's pretty awful, but it is better than nothing. So for right now, I would say yes, but make sure that it's very clear that, you know, you really want a moratorium and that this isn't working, but it does allow a community to organize around something. And so that way they'll have more power coming out of it to take on the next one and to join in the statewide fight for a moratorium. So I would say, yes, it's worth it, but just recognize that it's not the end all be all. Use it as a tool to organize your community.
So Val Vetter is wanting to know, what about working on local control?
Yes, that's a good question. In my opinion, I think we definitely need local control for not just this, but for a lot of things. But for confinement operations, I think we're beyond that right now. I don't think that that we can really afford to have too many more confinements in Iowa and still expect this to be a livable place where you can breathe clean air and drink clean water. So I think we're at the point where a moratorium is necessary. Local control is, if we thought that we can handle more, but we just want to have much more say over where they're going to go. But definitely, I would say I'm fully supportive of local control, but I think we're beyond that point with confinements. But Wally and Pam, weigh in.
The local control is sort of a moving concept because, whether it's state or local or even federal, depends on which level of government you think is going to give you what you want. So it isn't just necessarily one level of government's better than another. It's wherever you can get what you want, basically. But the thing that I've experienced is that in different counties, you will have supervisors who really take the job seriously and really make the CAFO applicant jump through the hoops. Other counties will do what they can, and other counties would rather not even touch this hot potato and not have, and just be glad to have the DNR do it and take the heat. So what really would make local control effective is if the citizens take control and let their county officials know that they don't want any more CAFOs.
I will add, though, related to local control is local zoning and having the CAFOs covered under the zoning regulations, just like we have any other industrial scale business, is really important. So that piece of local control, the Sierra Club would support. I'm going to move on to the next question, and it is from Douglas Rooney. And he says, I'm on the County Zoning Commission in Warren County. They have not approved the matrix. What are the best steps I can take to help them with this effort? Jess?
Yeah, Warren County. Yeah, I don't know if Warren County has passed it as long as I've been doing this and maybe even before. But what you really need to do is, so your county supervisors are elected. So the way that you can get them to pass the matrix is make them feel that, they're not going to get elected again if they don't do this. So I would, contact your community members, your neighbors, and ask them all to call the county supervisors and let them know that they want them to do this. It's going to probably take a lot of people in Warren County because Warren County's been one of those that just hasn't done it for a long time. Another good step could be having a sit down one-on-one, which maybe don't do in person right now because of COVID. But have a one-on-one, explain why this isn't working and why you actually want the ability to weigh in right now. And I think that's going to be the best step. But it's really, these are elected positions. So if you can pressure them to do something, the power you have over is them being unelected. So that would be my answer to that.
And it's important to clarify that the zoning laws do not apply to CAFOs. The legislature has passed a law saying that only the state has authority over the citing and permitting of CAFOs, and any effort by the county or local governments to regulate CAFOs is illegal. And there was a case several years ago I was involved in from Worth County, I believe it was, where the county health department passed a health ordinance that would have in effect regulated CAFOs. And that case went all the way to the Iowa Supreme Court. The Iowa Supreme Court said no, that the state law preempts any effort to regulate CAFOs.
So I'm going to move on to the next question, and that is from Susan Stade. And the question is, what is the total number of CAFOs in Iowa today of all sizes?
It's been a little bit since I've looked at the total number. I would say we're pushing, to be honest, I don't even think the DNR knows, because, you know, Sierra Club has been involved in this Clean Water Act campaign to try to bring factory farms into compliance with the Clean Water Act. And during that process, the DNR was required to do a site inventory to see how many were in the state. And even in that process, they found I think it was about 5,000 potential CAFOs that they didn't know if they were or if they weren't. And they had to do more investigations. So I don't think anyone really knows, but I feel comfortable saying we're pushing 15,000 here in the state, if not more. But it's pretty sad that I don't even think the DNR knows how many are here.
The DNR has a map that's really very illustrative, showing where all the CAFOs are in the state. And there are some areas that are just complete colored area where the CAFOs are. You can't even separate them.
Mm-hmm. Trying to see if I can really quick share my screen again here.
Okay, and I'll ask the next question while you're doing that.
Okay, I'm not sure if you can see it yet. There you go. This is 2019. You can see Iowa got dots pretty much everywhere. But this is different. This is the feedlots, confinements, multiple sizes. But you can kind of see that they're all over the state.
So the next question is from Representative Chuck Eisenhart. And he is asking, are any non-urban legislators with CAFOs in their districts on board to lead this effort? Is this a priority for ISAC, CDI, or other bodies of local officials?
I think that there are some rural legislators that recognize that there is a serious problem, and they are not very vocal about it, though. But I think that there may be a few that support us. I don't think they feel comfortable sponsoring a bill at this point. We need to get more legislators open with saying that they support a moratorium. I think that will open the door for them to feel more comfortable. But we do see some examples that have been public, like, for example, former Senator David Johnson was actually the senator who was head of the Senate Ag Committee when the Master Matrix passed. He says he is responsible for this problem, and he has changed his mind, and he is now on our side with this. He feels obligated to fix this problem that he helped create. He switched from Republican to independent, but he's from a rural county. So I think that there are some, it's just they need to feel supported and comfortable being able to say that publicly, and they need to feel comfortable that they're going to get reelected again. I think that's going to be an issue, but what we're seeing with county supervisors is, you know, over 20 counties in Iowa out of the 99 have passed some sort of resolution saying they want a moratorium or they want to stop the master matrix. So it's something that it's harder and harder to ignore, because it's, you know, Hardin County, it's like ground zero for factory farms in Iowa. They want a change to the master matrix. And so we're seeing it happen in more Republican areas. It's just going to take time to make it be a little bit more mainstream and make it more comfortable for people to be public about that. But we are really thankful for all the legislators who do speak up about this, because we know that it can be controversial in some areas. We really appreciate that, the legislators that have, and we'll do everything that we can to encourage more legislators to come out in support of a moratorium. And then with ISAC, when I've looked at some of their reports in the past, they recognize that there's a problem, but and they've been holding meetings in the past with county supervisors on how to address this, but they've not been a very outspoken leader on it. But maybe Pam or Wally, you have something to add with that.
We need to continue our work in this area and expand a little bit. It's been a tough last few years since we really don't have the majority of folks with us. And so we need to go back and reinitiate some of this.
Yeah, and for anyone that ISAC is Iowa Association of Counties. And
CDI, Conservation Districts of Iowa. I'm going to move on to the next question. I'm going to jump over to the chat. And Dick Seifers asks, does the master matrix apply based on the size of a singular building or a combination of buildings at a site that would combined have the animal, poultry, fish concentrations described in the matrix?
That's a big question.
Wow.
I can answer part of it, but I think Wally might want to fill in. Just from an example that I know is when I was working on a site in Hardin County, there was already a 2499 head site. So that's just one head of hog underneath the permit threshold. They wanted to expand it and double in size, which would put them over the permit threshold. So they did take into account animals that are in both buildings and combined them so that the new total head would have been just 2 under 5,000. So is that 4,998? But the problem there that we had with that specific situation was we believe that when you measure the separation distance, because when a site grows in size, their regulations change of how far away they have to be from things, their setback distances. We believe that you should measure from the nearest corner of the confinement to the nearest corner of the nearest house or of the nearest church or of the nearest business. And we've seen the ability to use some loopholes where they're measuring from the nearest corner of the existing building or the nearest corner of the building that might not be the closest to the house. So when you see large sites that are expanding like that, that opens the door for some more loopholes. But I'm gonna let Pam or Wally jump in on how they're counted across multiple animal types and that.
It got tricky also when the buildings side by side are not owned by the same LLC or the same set of owners. Now, there's been some change like in the last year or two about that, but it gets to be really, really sticky, and I'd recommend going to the DNR experts on that. But I'll toss that back to Wally so he can answer some questions too here.
I don't have much to add. It is tricky, and it depends on who the owners are. It depends on how far the buildings are from each other as to whether they're considered to be the same unit or not, or if they're considered to be an expansion of an existing unit. So the livestock industry has made it confusing so that you can't figure it out.
So I'm going to Don Pawlowski. Is the CAFO application process harder in other states or is it worse in Iowa?
I say it's the worst here. And of any state that I have encountered situations with, like I said, Minnesota has local control down to the township level. So every township, not even county, this is farther than the county level, they get to elect their own board of citizens in that township that can have the final say. So Minnesota has a stronger permitting process. North Carolina, they had a hurricane and they didn't always have underground pits just because it's a swampier area. You don't see a lot of basements there. So a lot of the manure was stored in lagoons. And when the hurricane came, it flooded everything and there was manure everywhere. And so they actually put a moratorium on earthen lagoons down in North Carolina, which effectively stopped or limited the growth of the industry. So North Carolina, it's really hard to do a new one there. Minnesota has a stronger permitting process. I believe Wisconsin does. I'm not super familiar with Wisconsin's permitting process, but we are ground zero. Like we are the feedlot between two rivers. And I think that's why we see them come to Iowa in a big way, is because of our lack of regulation and protections. Wally, you want to add anything?
Not too much, except to say that the livestock industry has been allowed to write the laws and to write the regulations, and they write them to their benefit. We were talking about the matrix and how there are distance requirements and so on. Those were written basically by the livestock industry, and the livestock industry wanted definite boundaries so they could know just how far they could go. And that's just exactly how far they go. So that as long as they stay within those boundaries, there's nothing you can do to them. Or they think that anyway.
So Diane Sinclair has a question and she says, none of it takes into consideration how far the stench travels. And that's a very good point. The experts say that stench can travel up to 6 miles. It's not uncommon for the stench to travel 3 miles, but none of our setbacks really look at how far the stench goes. Jess, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you covered that pretty much. There's, even like they'll plant trees that supposedly keep the stench from traveling far. That's not accurate either. So no, they don't really take into consideration that at all.
Kay Pence asked, does it matter how many CAFOs are in the area? And I'm going to add Claudia's, is it possible to address agricultural density? And Jess, I'll let you go ahead with that.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question, because just based on the siting of the facility, there's not really a density thing, but the manure management plans, so they have to have a plan for where they're going to put all their manure. And those plans have to list what fields they're going to be spreading it on, what crops they're going to be planting in that field, what conservation practices they may or may not have. And so that basically, there's this huge formula to figure out how much manure can each field handle. And so all these inputs, soil type, crop, conservation practices, get entered into the formula, and out pops a manure application rate, a maximum manure application rate. So eventually you could get to an area where you can't put any more, simply because there's not enough acres. But what we see is that the DNR does not really have the capacity to review all the manure management plans. And so a lot of them just get rubber stamped, and they just are assumed that it's accurate, when that's not the case all the time. And we've, different case studies have happened where they've mapped out where the manure is spreading, and they find the same field listed in multiple manure management plans. And then you get into the question there is, well, did both factory farms apply manure on that field? Well, the actual records of what they do with the manure is not available to the public. It's private information. So we really don't know where the manure is going, but that would basically be the way that we could account for density, is through really examining those manure management plans, especially in areas where you saw on the map that it's already really dense. Like I can't believe that there would be more acres of land that can take manure, especially in some of those places in Northwest Iowa. And then the other thing is, if the phosphorus level in the soil is really high already, you shouldn't be applying manure there at all. And that's a whole calculation called a P-index, and it's extremely complicated and can take multiple hours just to do one calculation, because you have to know all of the inputs. And so I think there's a lot of fields that are over applying on fields that already have too much phosphorus. There's a lot of phosphorus in manure, and phosphorus attaches to the soil. So when we have soil runoff, that will run off into the water, and then we see algal blooms, which we see all across the state. So that's a big sign that we are over applying on fields if we're seeing too much phosphorus in our rivers and lakes, and we're seeing beach closings. And it should be really hard for an algae bloom to form on a river because it's flowing water, but when we're seeing that happen across the state on rivers, I mean, there's a sign that there's too much manure going in the ground. But I don't think DNR has the capacity and unfortunately the will to actually do a good analysis like that.
Tim Wagner has a question. According to the Iowa Department of Agriculture, 2019 figures for hog totals, in the state there were about 25 million hogs. Do we know how accurate that is? And what I do know is that USDA publishes those numbers as well on a regular basis. And I don't know if anybody's done any checking on accuracy or not. Do you, Wally, or Jess, know?
I don't know. That's just the number you always hear. In fact, they may be going to 30 million pretty soon here. So, and that's 10 times the population of Iowa.
Yeah.
So.
I know I've heard stories from Iowans that have worked in confinement operations that they'll really pack those buildings, especially when they have to account for a dead rate. So not all the hogs make it till the end because they're confined in tiny spaces, standing above 1 million gallons of their own poop. And so it's not a healthy place to be. So I know that facilities do stack their buildings with more hogs than they're really permitted for, to account for how many will perish before they go to slaughter.
So
yeah, no one checks to see how many hogs are actually in the buildings. I mean, it may be, as Jess said, it may be permitted or not permitted, but built for 2,499 hogs, but there may be more than 2,500 in the building. No one knows.
Yeah, and DNR can't really do unannounced inspections. They give notice. So if you know that you have too many hogs in your building, you have time to get them out. You have time to fix any problems. So I don't think we really know that, to be honest, what the total number is.
So I'm back at the chat. Dick Sieverts is asking, who designed the master matrix test? When was it created? And when was it last updated? It's never been updated. We know that. Wally or Jess, would you like to take that?
The law was passed in 2002, and the matrix was basically, the matrix form itself was basically designed by the DNR. They had input, I'm not exactly sure from whom, but I'm sure the livestock industry had a lot of say in designing the matrix. The Sierra Club certainly wasn't invited to the table to help design it.
Yeah.
So, and as Pam and Jess said, the matrix is designed to favor the industry. So you can bet the industry had a lot of say in it.
Yeah. And Pam, I just want to let you know, it is 8:01, so maybe like one or two more questions.
Yes, or we could continue if anybody's interested. Let's, we have one. Please be specific that smelly air is the same as toxic air. At least that is my understanding. Jess?
I've always considered, like, if you can smell it, you're smelling something. You're smelling the ammonia. You're smelling something that's probably not good to be breathing in. But I am not an air quality expert, so.
And usually what Sierra Club says is just solving the odor problem doesn't solve all the other problems, the toxic gases and all that. So they're kind of related, but they're kind of not related. So usually if you solve the toxic gas problem, you solve the odor problem. But Wally, do you have some input on that?
I'm almost sure, although I'm not a scientist, I don't even play one on television, but certainly the odor comes from some sort of chemicals that are coming out of the building. There was one photo you saw on one of the slides of the big fans on the side of the building. Those fans are blowing air out of the building constantly. And if those fans weren't there, the air inside would be so toxic, the pigs would all die. That's why they have to have those fans on the building. And so there's certainly something in the air that's causing that odor, and it's certainly some sort of chemical that you don't want to be smelling, and certainly has some health effects. There have been tons of studies showing the adverse health effects from the air emissions from CAFOs.
I would like to continue. It's getting 8 o'clock, but I'd like to continue answering questions. We have a few more. We've got 34 people still on, 36 people. So drop off if you have to go somewhere else, but I'd like to continue for a few more minutes.
Sounds good.
So why do the counties have to elect to use the master matrix? Why isn't this state mandated? And that's the way the state law is. It shouldn't be that way, but here we are.
Yep. Yeah, it should be. There's no good reason for the way it is.
So Claudia is asking, can conflict of interest occur when a local county supervisor is also a CAFO owner?
If they have invested interest in that facility that they might be voting on, they should recuse themselves. But we have state legislators that own confinements that vote on confinement stuff all the time. So I think it really comes down to like your financial interest in it. But Wally, you're probably the expert on that one.
And EPC commissioners have been CAFO operators. But Jess is right that unless there's a direct financial interest, it's not technically a conflict. But I think certainly if that situation arises, the citizens and neighbors who are objecting should just raise holy hell about that and put that supervisor on the spot.
Absolutely.
So Claudia also says, I believe Scott County has karst topography. We can look for a map of the state. There are several areas in the state that have karst. It isn't just in Northeast Iowa, but that's where a lot of karst topography is. And if we find a map, we'll send that along when we send out the notice about this recording and where to find it. So somebody is asking, what about spills?
Oh, no, I don't.
What just well, we have a lot of manure spills. They're happening all the time, and I think you can tell that by the polluted waters list. When you look at the top reasons for impairments, a lot of them tie back to manure spills or tie back to manure in some fashion. I don't know if we hear about all the spills that may happen because they have to be reported. They are required by state law to report them, but that, you know, if you look at some violation histories, you'll see that some of them aren't reported within the time limit. So I think that there are probably a lot we don't see, but I think a lot of the manure entering our water is coming from runoff from fields. I think manure spills are also a big part of the problem, but it's more the fact that we aren't doing good conservation practices to keep soil in place, and to, you know, we're not supposed to spread manure on frozen or snow covered ground because when it thaws, it's just going to run off into the water. And we see that happen a lot of the time. You can, even if you're within the ban dates to apply manure on frozen or snow covered ground, you can get an exception from the DNR, and they most always grant them because it's better than the manure pit overflowing. But I think, in my opinion, it's like a lot of the manure that's entering our water is coming from runoff. You know, steep slopes, no cover crops, no buffer strips, no grass waterways or terraces. You know, in Iowa, our soil loss ratio, our average per acre, is just extraordinary. I think it's over 5.5 tons per acre in Iowa from the latest that I've heard. But manure spills are happening all the time. And DNR has a limit of how much they can fine them. So it ends up being a cost of doing business. It's not always a fine that is meaningful and actually prevents future pollution. So that's a big problem that we have.
Val Vetter wants to know, what is the lifespan of a confinement building? And that varies. I've heard 20 years, 25 years.
That's what I've heard.
But it may depend on how long the owner wants to stay in business. It may depend on whether they get cracks in the concrete and things like that. And so it varies.
And I've heard too that the average lifespan of a confinement is about when you'll pay it off, because how the industry works is, so the corporation owns the hogs, and so they get all the money from the sale, and the factory farmer owns the building and the debt and the manure and the pollution. And so once they pay off the confinement, it's about time that it's no longer able to work, and then they have to go into debt again to build another one to stay in business. So it's kind of like a trapped cycle that people are stuck in.
So Carrie has asked, do CAFOs have to meet ongoing standards to remain in operation? They do have to follow their manure management plans, and if they modify those plans or have new spread fields, they have to report those and update their plans. But in terms of the building, and is anybody inspecting the building itself, the answer is no.
No. And we knew that from our Clean Water Act campaign, is that they weren't doing any adequate inspections. They weren't visiting any of them, and DNR was going to really struggle to do an inspection of every confinement in the 5 years that they were given, just because they weren't doing that before. So no, they don't really know what's going on. They give advance notice, so like things can be fixed before the DNR inspector gets there. It's not good. So
Senator Joe Bolcom is asking us, Governor Reynolds appointed the DNR director, and the EPC members will always approve the CAFOs. They are not accountable. Moratorium is not within reach. Why not consider transferring CAFO approval to the Ag Secretary? Like the county sheriff, we directly elect the Ag Secretary. We can make Ag Secretary election a vote on clean water and CAFOs. That's very interesting, Joe.
Mm-hmm. I haven't thought about that before.
Yes, we'll talk about that and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, I think though the moratorium, even though it might not be in reach at the moment because of the makeup of the legislature, I think that has allowed people to organize and to build a base of people who are going to actually take action against factory farms in a way that it's harder to do if you don't have a really bold campaign. I think moratorium is our vehicle to build the base we need to actually pass it. So that's one thing I would add too is, you know, we know it's not going to be overnight, but we have to keep fighting for it. And the moratorium allows us to organize around that.
I wouldn't bet that the voters of Iowa would elect a Secretary of Agriculture that would to regulate CAFOs.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
We need to have a powwow on this. Maybe that's not the right word these days, but we need to discuss that. Representative Sharon Steckman is asking, can you get those counties that want to see a change contact the Republican legislators? Republican legislators feel we are taking jobs away from rural Iowa. How can we let them know that we will not be taking away jobs? I.e., father has a CAFO, his son wants to build one to support his family. We can't get this done without an outpouring of rural folks complaining to our legislators, putting the pressure on them. Sorry for the essay. So far, those of us that want to change are in the minority. We need rural support.
Mm-hmm.
There are more and more applications every day. It's ruining Iowa's land and water. But until we can convince, hang on, this cut out. Until we can convince the majority, that is a problem.
Right.
Yes.
We're going to be working on that. And I'm going to share my screen really quick again, because some Republican areas are doing that. Can we get enough to make a big impact? This is Hardin County's resolution that they passed in 2017. It was sent to Bill Dix, Dave Dio, and Pat Grassley, saying that they are not happy with the master matrix process. So it's happening, but it needs to happen on a much bigger scale. You're absolutely right, Representative Steckman, and thank you very much for being a champion on this issue.
So let me see if we've got any more questions or chats. We're getting to the end of the list. Representative Mary Masher, is there any hope with the Biden administration making federal changes that will impact factory farms?
I hope so. I hope that we have a strong EPA appointment. So the EPA administrator should, be strong enough that can allow us to use the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act to regulate factory farms. But I think that there's some worry over Tom Vilsack being appointed to Secretary of Ag because he's generally been very friendly to the ag industry, not only just corn and soybeans but the factory farm industry as well. But we do have some strong people in Congress that have taken action and introduced bills. Like Cory Booker has some good factory farm bills. Ro Khanna in the House has some good factory farm bills. But I think it's something we're going to have to push Biden on. I think where we'll get the most strength is his appointment to the EPA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there have been a number of references to regenerative agriculture. And what about Gina McCarthy, who's going to be in the White House as an advisor? Can the sons invest in regenerative farming and get away from CAFOs? I think these are all good points. And Gina McCarthy is going to be interesting as a leader of EPA, was interested in clean water issues and interested in ag. So I think there's a real good potential with Gina McCarthy advising
But when Gina McCarthy was EPA administrator, we met with her at the Des Moines airport.
In the airport, yeah.
We demanded a meeting, and so she gave us about a half an hour or so before she hopped on the plane. And it was clear to me that her heart may have been in the right place, but she really didn't want to take on big ag. Yeah. I really got that impression. She said, well, they're trying to do the right thing and they want to follow the rules. And I told her, no, this isn't like a regular industry, which tells most industries will say, well, they don't like the rules, but tell us what we need to do and we'll try to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But with the ag industry, says, we're going to write the rules, we're going to do what we want to do, and you're going to let us do it. So it's a different makeup of industry that you're trying to regulate. And I don't think Gina really comprehended that.
Well, yeah, when she came to town, she met with the industry and we had to push for a 30-minute meeting at the airport.
So we have a question from Anonymous. Is the moratorium effort part of the anti-animal agriculture movement? Sierra Club believes that agriculture should include animals, that they are part of the landscape. We do not approve of the CAFO model, but when they are pasture raised in the case of cattle or taken out of confinements and are part of a bigger system of regenerative agriculture, we are fine with that. So we are not part of an anti-animal agriculture movement. Wally or Jess, do you want to add anything?
No, you got that.
Let me see.
You guys have good questions.
These are very, very good questions. I'm not seeing any other questions. We still have 23 people.
One just came
here.
through, I think.
So we can give a minute or two in case somebody's typing in and we can get a last
one just came in.
Okay.
I can read it. I have it pulled up. Who has researched the numbers on the economic impact of CAFOs in rural areas? How do we show that most profits go to out-of-state corporations and most of the problems get dumped on Iowa and landowners? How is this different than chicken farmers in Arkansas getting screwed by big ag poultry? I know that there's a really good report that's out there. It's called The Economic Cost of Food Monopolies, I think. And it goes and takes the analysis of hog sales by county, and it was like the counties with the highest hog sales had the lowest. I'm not going to say it correct. I don't remember exactly what it was, but had the lowest system of an economic system in their rural economy. They had really bad rural economies, the counties that sold the most hogs. But I don't know if there's been anything recent. I think that was really old.
But you think about who the big companies are who own the animals, Tyson's, help me with some of the other names.
Prestige, Iowa Select, Smithfield.
Most of those companies are not Iowa based. Smithfield is owned by Chinese interests. Tyson is definitely out of state. And so ultimately the integrators, those people who own the animals, are not Iowans.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened, I think, over the last 20, 30 years is that the livestock industry has become so concentrated with the Smithfields and the Prestiges and so on, that they have been able to force the local farmers either go the CAFO model or get out of farming.
Mm-hmm.
And so the local operators are sort of up against the wall, and they're forced to do that. The only way a young farmer can get in to the business is to get a loan, as Jeff was saying, and get build a CAFO. But the hogs are owned by the integrator. The integrator tells the operator exactly how much feed to give the animals, when to take them to slaughter, and so on. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the figures, but I'm told that the actual operators make very little money from the CAFO operation. Most of the money goes to the integrator. So it really isn't a good model for anybody except the ag industry monopoly, and that monopoly should be broken up.
Yeah, and I think in Iowa too, and like if we look at what's happened in North Carolina, we're seeing it happen here now, is that the integrator has always been like a local farmer and a big company and partnering together. And I think that the big factory farm companies now want to have all owner interest of the facilities. It's easier to just not have to deal with the local guy. And so in North Carolina, I've heard from a few People who own confinements and are sick of the model because they're used to getting 2.5 cycles of hogs a year. So it doesn't take the whole year to grow hogs. You can grow 2.5 cycles of hogs each year. And then the big integrator, the big ag company, lowers that to just 2 a year, kind of squeezing that farmer with less profits, less ability to exist. And they're seeing them squeezed out of their contracts. And when we look in Iowa, that's happening here now too. Instead of it being a big company and a local guy, it's a lot of the times just the big company that owns everything outright. We see Prestige doing that model a lot. Iowa Select's doing that model a lot. So I think it's changing over time where there's not going to be really any local benefit because it's all owned by an out-of-state corporation.
So I have a couple things here. One from Claudia that says, don't give up on Gina McCarthy. Let's contact her and push this concern, and we'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie Radloff is saying, thanks to all the elected officials for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you. We had a lot of you on tonight.
Yes, yes, we appreciate it. And Kay Pence is saying, Jess, do you have a link to the report you just mentioned about the economics?
Yeah, I can put that in the follow-up email that I'll send out. Yep, I'm pretty sure it's called The Economic Cost of Food Monopolies, but I will find it.
Okay, and with that, we have answered all the questions. We still have 23 people who hung on. So thank you very much for your interest. We've had a wonderful discussion. And hey, hang in there. We'll be in touch with you if we need any help with the CAFO moratorium at the Iowa legislature.
Thank you very much. And we'll send out an email with the recording and anything else that we've discussed tonight. So look for that either tomorrow or Friday in your inbox.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carrie says, great job, y'all.
Yay, thank you, Carrie. That was a fun one to do. I like it when we get lots of questions, especially when they throw you for a loop sometimes. And I'm like, ooh, that's a good one.
Yes.
You need to let it bullshit, Jess.
All right, let's see here.
I'll let you sign us all out. You have a nice evening, what's left of it. And we'll talk to you tomorrow, Jess.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I better actually,